My parents said I wasn't welcome after I came out, now they need me. When I came out as gay, my parents told me they needed time to process it. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would change. How every little thing I did suddenly became a problem. How the tension in my own home became unbearable. Then, after one argument over vacuuming, my dad said, "You're not living with us anymore." My mum packed my things, and just like that, I was sent to my grandmother's house. Now, they're asking me for favors like nothing ever happened. But why should I help the people who told me to leave? When I came out as gay, my parents told me they needed time to process it. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would change. How every little thing I did suddenly became a problem. How the tension in my own home became unbearable. Then, after one argument over vacuuming, my dad said, "You're not living with us anymore." My mum packed my things, and just like that, I was sent to my grandmother's house. Now, they're asking me for favors like nothing ever happened. But why should I help the people who told me to leave? I had always known my parents weren't the most open-minded people, but I never thought coming out would push them to treat me differently. When I finally gathered the courage to tell them, I wasn't expecting a celebration, but I also wasn't prepared for the cold distance that followed. My mum's face crumpled as she started crying, and my dad sat stiffly in his chair, looking more disappointed than surprised. "We love you," they said, but their voices sounded hollow, like they were forcing the words out because they knew they were supposed to say them. Then came the part that hurt the most. "But we need time to process this." At first, I thought that meant they just needed to adjust, that maybe things would be awkward for a little while, but would eventually settle. I was wrong. Almost overnight, it was like I had become a stranger in my own home. My parents stopped talking to me the way they used to. Our usual family dinners became tense, silent affairs. My mum avoided eye contact, and my dad kept his conversations with me short and to the point, as if anything beyond basic small talk was too much to handle. It felt like they were grieving something, as if the son they thought they had no longer existed. And then came the nitpicking. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. If I didn't do my chores immediately, I was being lazy and irresponsible. If I spent too much time in my room, I was being distant. If I laughed at my phone, my mum would give me a sharp look and ask, "What's so funny?" Like she expected the answer to confirm her worst fears. It wasn't just about my behavior. It felt like they were trying to find a reason to be mad at me, as if they needed me to prove them right about whatever new version of me they had built up in their heads. Before I came out, I had always helped around the house, but now, no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. My mum started making passive-aggressive comments about responsibility and learning how to be part of a family, as if I had somehow stopped being a part of ours. My dad would mutter about how I needed to pull my weight, even though I wasn't doing anything differently than before. It hurt in a way I didn't know how to explain. They hadn't screamed at me or kicked me out right away, but they had made it clear that I was no longer truly welcome. The warmth, the casual conversations, the feeling of being safe in my own home, it was all gone. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure if they realized what they were doing. I kept waiting for things to go back to normal, for my parents to realize that I was still the same person I had always been. But with every passing day, it became clearer that they weren't just struggling to accept me, they were pushing me away. And eventually, they would push too hard. I kept waiting for things to go back to normal, for my parents to realize that I was still the same person I had always been. But with every passing day, it became clearer that they weren't just struggling to accept me, they were pushing me away. And eventually, they would push too hard. At first, I tried to brush off the constant nitpicking. Maybe they were just stressed. Maybe they really did need time to adjust. But the more it happened, the harder it was to ignore. It was like they were looking for reasons to be frustrated with me. Like every little thing I did was suddenly proof that I was difficult, disrespectful, or not acting like part of the family. I had always done my share of the chores. I washed the dishes after dinner, I took out the trash, and I cleaned my room without being asked. But suddenly, it wasn't enough. If I didn't do something the exact moment my mum wanted, she'd sigh dramatically and say something like, I guess I'll just do everything myself. If I told her I'd do it later, she'd get irritated and tell me I needed to learn responsibility. My dad would chime in with his usual comment, "This is part of being in a family." But was it? Because I never saw them breathing down my little brother's neck the same way. If he forgot to take out the trash, they'd remind him with a light-hearted, "Hey, don't forget next time." If I forgot, I'd get a whole speech about how I needed to start pulling my weight and acting like an adult. I started realizing that it wasn't about the chores. It wasn't even about me being lazy or irresponsible, because I wasn't. It was about control. They couldn't change the fact that I was gay, but they could make me feel like I was failing in other ways. They could convince themselves that the problem wasn't them struggling to accept me, it was me being difficult. And they did. No matter how hard I tried to do what they wanted, it was never enough. If I finished my chores early, they'd find something else for me to do. If I tried to stay out of their way, they'd accuse me of being distant. Every conversation felt like a test I was doomed to fail. I started dreading being at home, walking on eggshells every second, waiting for the next passive-aggressive comment or disappointed sigh. The worst part, they made me feel like I was the problem, like I was the one who had changed, who wasn't trying hard enough to fit in. But I hadn't changed at all. I was just finally being honest about who I was. They were the ones who couldn't handle it. I still held on to the hope that things would get better. That if I just kept my head down and did what they asked, they'd stop treating me like a burden. But it didn't matter how much I tried, because in their eyes, I wasn't their son anymore. I was something they had to tolerate. And that realization made what happened next almost inevitable. I still held on to the hope that things would get better. That if I just kept my head down and did what they asked, they'd stop treating me like a burden. But it didn't matter how much I tried, because in their eyes, I wasn't their son anymore. I was something they had to tolerate. And that realization made what happened next almost inevitable. The breaking point came over something as small as vacuuming. My mum asked me to do it while I was in the middle of something else, and I told her I'd do it later. That was apparently the wrong answer. She immediately snapped, telling me I needed to do it now and that I was always making excuses. I was already exhausted from the tension, from the constant pressure, from the feeling that nothing I did was good enough, so I shot back, "Why does it even matter? It's not like anyone's coming over." The second the words left my mouth, I knew she was going to explode. She went off about how I never helped out, how I had no respect for her, how I was lazy and ungrateful. My dad got involved, shaking his head and saying I had an attitude problem and that I needed to start acting like part of the family. That's when something inside me snapped. I had spent the last few weeks trying so hard to prove that I still belonged, that I was still their son, still worthy of their love. And yet, nothing I did was ever enough. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how many chores I did, no matter how much I tried to tiptoe around their discomfort, they still looked at me like I was a disappointment. So I said what I had been holding in for weeks. "Maybe I'd actually want to help if you didn't make everything about how much I disappoint you." Silence. For a second, I thought maybe they finally understood how I felt. Then my dad's expression hardened. His voice was sharp when he said, "If you can't follow our rules, then you're not living with us anymore." At first, I thought he was bluffing, just trying to scare me into backing down. But then my mom, without hesitation, turned and walked to my room. Within minutes, she was packing my things. She wasn't just angry, she meant it. I stood there frozen, watching her shove my clothes into bags, like I was some unwanted guest overstaying my welcome. She didn't even look at me as she said, "You can go stay with your grandma until you learn how to be part of a family." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the vacuum or my so-called attitude. This was their way of getting rid of me, at least for now. They wouldn't say it outright, but this was punishment. They wanted me to feel guilty, to come crawling back to beg for their approval. But I wouldn't. I grabbed my bags and left, my heart pounding with anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite name yet. Maybe relief. Because if they didn't want me in their house, I sure as hell wasn't going to fight to stay where I wasn't wanted. I grabbed my bags and left, my heart pounding with anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite name yet. Maybe relief. Because if they didn't want me in their house, I sure as hell wasn't going to fight to stay where I wasn't wanted. My grandma welcomed me with open arms. No questions asked. Her house was quiet, calmer than the suffocating tension I had grown used to at home. But even though she was kind, it was clear she didn't fully understand what had happened. She kept telling me, "Give them time," as if this was just a normal argument between parents and a rebellious teenager, as if my being kicked out of my own home was something I could just fix by saying sorry. But I wasn't sorry. I was angry. Not just at them, but at the fact that even after they sent me away, they still acted like they had a right to my time, my help, my effort. It started with texts, small, casual ones at first. "Hey, can you come over and watch your brother for a few hours? Your dad needs help with the garage this weekend. When are you coming to mow the lawn?" Like nothing had happened. Like I was still supposed to play the role of the dutiful son, even though they had made it very clear that I wasn't welcome in their house unless I proved myself worthy. At first, I ignored them, but they kept coming. And finally, when my mum texted, "We're still your parents, and you need to step up when we need you," I snapped. I texted back, "If you needed my help so bad, maybe you shouldn't have kicked me out." No response. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my mum. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. The moment I picked up, she launched into a speech about how selfish I was being, how family means supporting each other no matter what, how I needed to grow up and stop holding grudges. I let her talk. I let her say everything she wanted to say. And when she finally stopped to take a breath, I said, "Family means supporting each other. Funny, I don't remember you supporting me when you told me to leave." Silence. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. Not because I was scared or guilty, but because for the first time, I had stood up for myself without backing down. And instead of arguing, instead of justifying what she did, she had no response. But that wasn't the end of it. My grandma sat me down later that night, shaking her head. "You shouldn't talk to your mother that way," she said. "She's still your mother." And maybe she was. Maybe she always would be. But the truth was, being a parent isn't just a title. It's a responsibility. And if she wanted to be my mother, she should have acted like it before she told me I wasn't living with them anymore. So no, I wasn't going to apologize. And I sure as hell wasn't going to go running back to help the people who treated me like I was disposable. So no, I wasn't going to apologize. And I sure as hell wasn't going to go running back to help the people who treated me like I was disposable. But that didn't stop my grandmother from trying to convince me otherwise. She kept bringing it up in small ways, softly at first, as if she was testing the waters. "You know, your parents love you," she would say while making dinner. Or, "They're just stressed," when she caught me ignoring their messages. I tried to let it roll off my back, but it became harder when she started acting like I was the one who needed to make amends. "They're still your parents. You shouldn't be so disrespectful. You need to learn to forgive." Every time it chipped away at me little by little. Not because I was starting to believe she was right, but because it reminded me of how easily people dismissed what had happened to me. To them, this was just a normal family argument, one that I should be big enough to move past. But how could I? How could I just forget that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had made it clear that their love had limits, and my parents didn't make it any easier. They still sent messages, still asked for favors like nothing had changed. They still acted like I was some wayward child, refusing to do my part instead of a son they had sent away. I started wondering if they even realized how much damage they had done. Did they think I was just sulking? That I was making a big deal out of nothing? Did they truly believe they could push me out when it was convenient for them and then expect me to show up the moment they needed something? And then, after weeks of ignoring their requests, my mother sent me one final message. I hope you're happy, being so selfish. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us. That was the moment I knew. She would never see me as anything but a problem. She didn't see what they had done as wrong. She saw me as the one breaking the family apart. I sat with that realization for a long time. I thought about all the times I had tried to prove myself to be the son they wanted me to be. I thought about all the ways I had tried to shrink myself down to avoid making them uncomfortable. I thought about all the moments I had second-guessed whether I was asking for too much by simply wanting to be loved as I was. And then I thought about my future, a future where I didn't have to walk on eggshells, a future where I didn't have to fight for basic respect, a future where my worth wasn't something I had to earn. I knew then that I didn't owe them anything. Not my help, not my time, and certainly not my forgiveness. If they wanted to be a part of my life, they could be. But it would be on my terms. They had made their choice when they told me to leave. Now, I was making mine. And this time, I wasn't looking back. I used to think that family was something unbreakable. That no matter what, parents would always stand by their children. But I learned the hard way that love with conditions isn't love at all. My parents made their choice when they sent me away, and I made mine when I stopped letting them treat me like I was only worth something when they needed me. Maybe one day they'll realize what they lost, but I won't be waiting for that day to come. So I ask you, when family fails you, when they make it clear that their love has limits, do you still owe them a place in your life?